And I think that every lunch speaker you're going to hear from today, including our moderator, all the panelists and all the speakers are people who fit that description, local leaders who are in positions of power and are willing to take risks. Finally, as we enjoy yet another delicious meal together, I want to remind us to not let the signs of economic prosperity that are all around us fool you. While many of us were in this hotel comfortable last night, at least 4,000 people were sleeping on the streets of King County. As our incredible young poet reminded us this morning, the sky is falling. These are not normal times. Our communities and our young people deserve better, and bold local leadership has never been more important. We would not be where we are in our efforts to build a strong re-engagement system for opportunity youth in this region without the visionary leadership and partnership of our colleagues at King County government. So to kick us off in this discussion, please help me in wishing a warm welcome to our county executive, Dow Constantine.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And welcome, everyone. I know you've been welcomed a million times. So welcome to South King County. I'm so glad you could all join us today. And I know that although I've talked to some of my friends who I see on a regular basis here locally, I know an awful lot of folks here have joined us from across the country, folks who are involved in this critical work to reconnect young people to opportunities. So for those who are visiting our region, I am particularly happy that rather than leaving with the impression that every day is like yesterday, you get to see our steel gray skies under which we live about 10 and a half months out of the year. This is a perfectly normal King County day. And I appreciate the National Spotlight Aspen Institute is focused on opportunity youth. The fact that there are so many young adults who are disconnected from school and from work represents a failure of our systems. We haven't provided the supports these young people need to thrive, but they represent enormous potential. Investing in young people is critical and will have an effect not just on them directly, but a ripple effect on future generations of children and families. You know, here in King County, we are investing in young people across the continuum of their early years. Yes, we had fallen in the same trap as other jurisdictions across the nation and, of course, the national government of responding to crisis, of responding to the results of neglect, of responding to bad outcomes. But now we're turning it around. We're intentionally getting ahead of the curve. We are actively making investments as early as possible in order to get kids on the right path and prevent them from becoming imperiled in the first place. Healthy development from day one. We're preventing problems from ever occurring, but also intervening early when they do occur. We cannot give up, we will not give up on any person. And we now know from research that brain development continues, as you know, well into young adulthood. In addition, many of our opportunity youth also have young children of their own, and they need support in being the best parents that they can be. That's why I work to develop and pass what we call Best Starts for Kids. It's a 6-year property tax levy that generates an average of about $65 million a year. We start with prenatal interventions, particularly for low-income, first-time mothers, and then supporting new parents as they work to become their baby's first and best teachers. It means partnering with education and community providers to bring trauma-informed practices into schools. It means investing in enriching out-of-school time and summer programming and supporting the development of community-based efforts to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline. And it means investing in opportunity youth to help them re-engage in education and employment experience. At King County, we were doing this even before Best Starts for Kids. Our programs served about 1,000 opportunity youth every year. We partnered with community colleges, with school districts, with community-based organizations to build a coordinated system of alternative pathways to education and employment. strategic investments from private funders like the United Way, Ballmer Group, the Rakes Foundation, have helped the county to expand our role and bring additional public funds to this critical work. And I'm particularly proud of Reconnect to Opportunity, an effort that was piloted by the Roadmap Project and King County with funds from United Way and is now supported by that Best Starts for Kids levy. This regional outreach employs young people as peer connectors. These young adults, and you may have met some of them already, connect directly with opportunity youth in the community, understand their future aspirations, and understand the barriers they are experiencing, and help them find and enroll in the best fit pathway. You're going to hear from Frida Crichton, one of those peer connectors on the panel, who I am proud to say is a King County employee. The county also operates 2 engagement centers, re-engagement centers for opportunity youth, including Youth Source, which some of you had the chance to visit yesterday. Now, each day, my team and our key partners help young people like Christian. He was referred to Youth Source by a peer connector. Even though he had dropped out of high school in the 11th grade, he was ready to earn his GED and passed all 4 required tests within just a few months of enrollment. Christian's career goal is to become a certified auto mechanic. Christian recently completed Youth Source's job readiness training curriculum and was placed in a paid internship at Mako. He's gaining the professional experience he needs to be successful, and Seattle Education Access is helping him find an auto mechanic program that will work best for him. Christian is one of hundreds of youths who my team support and our key partners work together to support. Now, I talked about Best Starts. I'll explain a little bit more. With Best Starts for Kids, we're serving more opportunity youth than we had previously, and we're funding community-based organizations to help provide the supports youth who are at risk of dropping out of school need to stay on track, both to graduate and, if they want to enter college. And we also have an exciting new revenue source, another one that we can use to support opportunity youth. I led the coalition that put together a radically ambitious expansion of our high-capacity transit system. It's called Sound Transit 3, and part of Sound Transit 3 is a set-aside for the county to invest in education services. So just last week, we put out an RFP outlining our priority areas for those investments. One of my potential priority strategies is helping to reduce financial barriers to success in post-secondary education. Our goal is that post-secondary degree or apprenticeship will lead to a living wage job for all youth. A GED or high school diploma is an important milestone, but it has to be considered the launch, not the destination. Our investments in opportunity youth are a part of our broader efforts to reimagine our workforce development system. In an economy that includes Amazon and Boeing, and Amazon at least as of yesterday, and Boeing and Microsoft, and many other great global companies, and with an unemployment rate well below 4%, it should be within our power to make sure that every person, including all youth, has access to opportunity. If our region is to continue to thrive and become more inclusive and equitable, we need to make sure that people in the region are prepared for the jobs that are here now and the jobs that will be here in the future. And to achieve this goal, we're reinventing our local workforce board to make it a true hub for the region's workforce policy and funding, and that it is meant to be. This means putting more resources into our workforce board, reshaping the board, and empowering it to set regional goals around workforce. It means building partnerships that provide us with funding support and flexibility for the strategies that we know will be successful. And as a part of this reimagining, we're going to bring career awareness and industry-informed problem-based learning to kids in their academic experience. This career-connected education can keep youth engaged and on a path toward post-secondary education or apprenticeship and a living wage job. And we're excited to partner with the Roadmap Project and others to significantly increase the number of young people in King County and South King County who are on track to college and career. Now, I've heard a little bit because I had a section of the speech I wanted to share with you, but I didn't have time, so I'm going to go ahead and try to do it. I hope you'll excuse me if I run a few seconds over. I want to talk about what we're doing around juvenile justice reform, because as many as 41% of the opportunity youth have had justice involvement. In our eyes, every child who drops out or gets locked up is a failure. But it's not the kids who are failing us. We are failing the kids. King County has been a leader in creating alternatives. And as a result, we have cut detention rates from a daily average of nearly 200 in 1998 to 50 in 2017 to just 35 the last few weeks. But we have more to do, and even though we have made progress in reducing racial disproportionality as well, it is a vexing challenge for the entire community to take on. We're proud of our progress. We have to keep looking deeper into the disparities. By adopting a public health approach, by shifting to a transformative and restorative model of juvenile justice, we limit the traumatization of youth in detention and ensure families have access to the supports in the community. We must work together to reach the point where we rarely, if ever, need secure detention to protect the community because we have safer, better, more therapeutic options for the youth. And even more important, because we have prevented the earlier conditions in life that have led to that youth's first contact with the police. We've adopted zero youth detention as a goal. It is obviously aspirational, but it is an accountability measure. It compels us to ask in each case, how can we provide justice for the victim? How can we protect the community from further harm? But also, how can we ensure the best chance for redemption for this young person? And critically, how can we prevent the next generation from coming into contact with the justice system in the first place? So, recognizing the time, I'd like to close by underscoring how important local leadership is in this work. And by local leadership, I'm talking about the work that all of you do in your communities. Our prosperous, globally connected region is nonetheless facing vast social challenges. An increasing crisis of income inequality, racial disparities, skyrocketing rates of homelessness. Now, historically, we've sometimes waited for solutions to come from the federal or state government. Clearly, at this time in our country, that is not a wise choice. We are, in many ways, on our own. We have to chart the course ourselves. Local leadership is the way forward on our national challenges. And it is exciting to be in a room with many other people working locally on arguably some of the biggest challenges of our time. So keep up the incredible work and enjoy your time in our beautiful, if slightly gray corner of the world. And I'm so pleased to have been invited to join you here today. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so excited to be here, and I want to thank again Executive Constantine for kicking off our plenary session. We really wouldn't be where we are as a system in King County without the role of King County government moving from a strong service delivery leader to a leader in building a system for opportunity youth. And I thank the executive, and I want to also do a special shout out to Jennifer Hill on his team, who's really been the leader by our sides, developing programs and helping expand them. So thank you to both of them. I'm Sara Levin. I'm the Vice President of Community Services at United Way of King County. We are thrilled to have been part of the Opportunity Youth work in this region since the beginning. And I'm thrilled to be up on this stage about to moderate what I've been calling a Rockstar Dream Team panel. No pressure, you guys. I'm usually on your side of the room, and I'll have to say I'm a little bit nervous, but I also want to do a good enough job so that Steve Patrick invites me back. I won't be as funny as Steve Patrick usually is, but I will absolutely do my best to get us a really good conversation going and to make sure that we have time for your questions and comments. Just a little bit of additional context. The panel that we have here today, we've got Dr. Calvin Watts, who's the superintendent of the Kent School District. And if I have my geography right, Kent is that way, because I think that way is north. So Kent is a district, a city, and a school district a little bit that way. We have Dr. Sheila Edwards-Lang, who's the president of Seattle Central College, a little bit that way, in Seattle. And then we have Frida Crichton, who's a peer connector. We've already heard about Frida, peer connector with Reconnect to Opportunity at King County. And I'm also really thrilled to have Danica Martinez, who's a program director at Seattle Education Access, and she'll be joining, she's with us as well today. We all came together as a community really about 6 or 7 years ago, compelled by the data. We're a really data-driven community, I'm proud to say, and we saw at the time that there were more than 20,000, depending on how you slice and dice the numbers, opportunity youth in our region. And we came together realizing that as a system, or as a community, we are very program rich. We have lots and lots of programs and amazing partners doing really great service delivery or educational services, yet we were system poor. So when we came together as a community, we realized that not only did we have a crisis in terms of the numbers of opportunity youth, but we also had an opportunity to really come together and build a system to serve those youth better and start to stop the pipeline. We also had the incredible opportunity, I want to be humble here, recognizing that with so many folks who are not from this region, it can feel like Seattle's constantly, and King County are constantly talking about all of our great resources. And we do have a lot of resources, and I want to recognize that not every community is lucky enough to have a Best Starts for Kids, as Executive Constantine mentioned, or not as fortunate as to have what we have at our state level, the Open Doors funding that has allowed us to leverage state entitlement education dollars to help support opportunity youth programs in our region. We recognize that we have a lot of resources here, and we want to make sure we're using them in the best way possible. So we realized as we were all coming together about 7 years ago, we had this state source called Open Doors, that it was going untapped, that we had the chance to pull together as a system, not only of service providers, of education leaders, of philanthropists and funders, and to try to do the best that we could for the 20,000 opportunity youth in our region. We have been able to leverage dollars at all levels, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We've been able to leverage social innovation funds, WIOA, SNAP funding for education and training, the Best Starts dollars. And we also have had the opportunity, as philanthropy, and United Way in particular got involved early on with other amazing partners like the Rakes Foundation and the Ballmer Group, we've been able to leverage private dollars to catalyze some of those more sustainable ongoing government investments. We're really excited as well to have the Roadmap Project as our hub for all of the opportunity youth work. You heard from Nicole. I know Mary Jean Ryan is in the back. And the Roadmap is really a jewel of our region. It is our collective impact cradle to career initiative that focuses on South King County and has been a hub for the opportunity youth work we've been doing from the very beginning. So finally, given all of those players and how do we make sense of this system, I want to just talk about kind of 3 things that we think about at United Way and I think about in my role. I think about investment, I think about where the dollars are going and how we are investing in the strongest grantees who are focusing on racial inequities and how they address them through their services. I think about influence. How are we collectively using our power to change policies, knowing that policy change is the only way to systematize and make changes so that we can stop the flow of opportunity youth into the community, into the pipeline. And then I think about leverage and how we're leveraging dollars, we're leveraging volunteers, we're leveraging great minds like those in this room. And so with that frame of investment, influence, and leverage, I want to sit down and start asking our panelists to share their views with us. So I'm going to start with Frida. So Frida, as a young leader, who was involved in the early planning around this work. And really, youth voice has been so critical from day one, and Frida has been with us from day one, bringing the youth voice to the shaping of how we're making our investments and what our programming looks like. And we need you as a peer connector, Frida, and we need you to really ground us in sort of the reality of the opportunity youth that we're serving in the community. Could you talk to us about what the barriers are that are facing young people in our communities, and why are they looking for alternative pathways? So what are the barriers, and then why are they looking for pathways that are different from what have currently existed in the past?
Sure. Oh, this is on. Sorry. I highlighted 5. Don't mind me. I made notes in case I messed up. I think the first one would be like language barrier. It's a huge thing, even after working in a high school. As much as you want to help a young person, it's quite impossible if you don't understand them and they don't understand you. And I noticed in our traditional high school settings, there's really not a lot of support provided for ESL students, ELL, English learning students. And even in classrooms, teachers tend to go on without even stopping to find a way to break things down for students that don't speak English very well. So that language barrier is a big one. Obviously, another big one is just plain racism. It was very real when I was in high school, but it was even more real having gone back to my own high school and working as a staff and seeing how different students were treated. I shared an office with the woman who was running the in-school suspension for the high school, and so her and I kind of tag team to work with these, tougher students. But it was just really unfortunate to see them coming in for having put their head down in class or eating a bag of Cheetos in class. And of course, they're always going to be your black and brown students. We have even had students been put in ISS because, the sheriff, I don't know why the sheriff gets a right, but he gets the right to place students in, discipline. And I see him in the hallways, flirting with white female students. And I'm like, look, aren't you gonna, push this student along to class as well? And he's like, well, class is almost over. So, and then reporting that to the white principal, it's like, and you don't see it being addressed. So racism is real in our system. And a really big one, I would say, is life circumstances and just the student's life situation. I think it's really easy to look at our students and see just a student, not a student that's wondering if she should get an abortion, not a student that has a 5-year-old, not a student who's a father. Students are going through so many things at home. So all those things, they're already carrying with them, and then they come to school and try to put on that, I'm okay, I'm here to finish, and not having anyone to trust. So that lack of an adult support or key relationship in school that can really get you going, because at the end of the day, once everything, bottles up inside and have no one to turn to, they tend to just check out. They'd rather hide their pregnancy or what they're going through than put it out for no one who cares about them. I want to say an example I often say. There was a teacher that was going through a divorce for 6 months, and for 6 months she's just crying through the school year. The students are like, Miss Frida, we can't learn this teacher's crying, we get it, she's going through a divorce. After 6 months, she picked herself up, she was doing great, and she came to me, she said, one of your students, so I was leading a Pacific Islander club at the time, so I was working with about 23 Pacific Island young men. Most of them were men, I only had about 4 girls, and my boys were tough, but they were doing good. Their attendance had doubled just for having a key adult to support them. She's like, I know you're working with this young man. His behavior's changing. I don't know what's going on. I'm like, oh, yeah, well, his father just got out of prison. His father is a heavy alcoholic. The student puts his father to bed between 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. So what do you expect the student to just come to school and smile for you and continue to get straight A's? You were affected by your situation, and the student's also affected by their situation. So why, so we have to allow students to hurt, and maybe that will show up in ways that, we may not like, but why not seek out the reason for why students are acting a certain way or why their behavior changes versus just coming to a young adult who you think can go and scold the young adult. No, that's not what I was put there for. And the last thing I want to add is mental health. Sometimes when students that we're working with, share information, very deep, very heavy, sometimes I don't even know what to say. I don't even know how to help you. Fortunately, in our county, there's many programs that provide mental health now for free to young adults, but it's tough when you're going through the education system and you don't want to admit you're bipolar. And I actually want to add one last thing. Sorry, oh my God, I don't even know if you guys are still listening to me, but I want to say, I want to also say, another big problem is just from my personal experience, would be principals, just because sometimes students and teachers and more staff and other advocates will report something, and sometimes something horrible, and really for it to just vanish into thin air, it's not okay, and we just have to do better. That's it.
Frida, we've been so lucky to have your voice shaping what we've done for the last several years, so thank you. And that's it, because I'm going to ask you more questions later. So Dr. Watts, you have to follow Frida. My question for you is, our state Open Doors Open Doors dollars have created a really unique opportunity where our K-12 districts have been able to be major partners in the work to support opportunity youth. Your school district, Kent, was one of the first South King County districts to step up and really embrace doing work differently to take advantage of those state funds. Given the many, many competing priorities you have on a daily basis, how do you think about the role of the K-12 system in addressing the needs of students who've fallen through the cracks? And what can districts do, including mobilizing where partners are critical?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the Aspen Institute for having us and having me, and I'm certainly happy to be here to serve. My wife and I have 27,000 children. We have one who lives with us. And that begins the response to your first question. When we as adults, and thank you, Frida, for the context, when we as adults reach and teach all and each and every child as if he or she had our last name, we're compelled to lead differently. And anyone in Kent School District will know that that is exactly where we begin. Relationships, rigor, relevance. In Kent School District, and while I've served as superintendent now in my third year, in 2012, as innovative practices that have come before us, and we continue to lead with an equity agenda in mind, particularly race and equity. IGRAD, our academy, one of our 43 school facilities that provides support for students based on Open Doors, age 16 to 21, who have dropped away from school, who have, for whatever reason, not felt a connection based on the way the adults interact, the way peers interact, or the way our system, because I do believe this, as the saying goes, every system is brilliantly designed to get the results that it does, and the results that we are getting are certainly not enough. We are proud of the students who are succeeding, and in all frankness, we have many, many more who need to be successful. So we begin by creating access to opportunities outside of the instructional day. Public education believes strongly that opportunities exist for students. Unfortunately, we also believe that one size will fit all. And I don't know if that works for any of you, but I do know that choice matters and opportunities and access matters. And so what we've provided in Kent School District is iGrad through a storefront which serves as an oasis for well, I'll say this, it's in a desert of opportunity for our students. They come between 8 in the morning and 8 p.m. They have opportunities if their family life provides a barrier where they cannot make school on time at 6 o'clock or that it ends at 3 o'clock. We provide relationships, so caring adults, counselors, principal, assistant principal. In the case where student safety is at risk, we do have adults who are providing care and concern. Maslow's before Bloom's, and what I mean by that is our students have varying basic needs that need to be addressed before we can talk about how well and to the extent that they can learn. Now, that doesn't mean that learning is not important. We know that. And achievement has to be part of our goal. We are a teaching and learning organization, but we have partnered with community-based organizations that provide resources for our students, not only human resources, provided time in variable measure so that students can work if they need to in the morning and come to school, or vice versa. We've also provided access to clothing, to support for those who have been in various states of trauma. So our goal is to reach and teach all students. We know we do that in a very different way in iGrad relative to our traditional schools. We have several community-based organizations that provide monetary resources, provide job-embedded, career-connected learning opportunities for our students who understand that this is an opportunity for me to not only learn and achieve at increasingly higher levels through core content. We provide through a one-to-one device initiative. Our students have a laptop where they can have access to a 24/7 curriculum and instructional opportunities so that they can obviously can complete their coursework on towards a high school equivalency or GED through a partnership with Green River College, one of our 2-year and 4-year program institutions in the region, provide opportunities for an associate's degree. And when we think about access, we have to think about equality of outcomes. Access and equity, meeting our students where they are, is exactly what we have been driven towards. And our race and equity policy, that we are one of 5 school districts in the state of Washington that has passed and adopted a race and equity policy that points a finger to the youth in our school district, 70% of whom are youth of color. And what does that mean? That means that we have to make sure that all means all. Each and every student. And right now, we can't say that. However, iGrad does give us a better opportunity, a more advantageous opportunity for our students who, outside of K-12 organization, outside of traditional model, would not have access to core content or what I would call career-connected learning opportunities.
Great, thank you. Yeah. I think that's one of the sort of themes that I've heard in both what you and Frida said was sort of around the need to have resources to be able to support those things that are outside the education system that may be barriers for the young people to either reconnect or to be able to persist in their education. And I think that's something that's important for funders to think about. I listed a number of sort of government sources that we've been able to leverage, but for the private philanthropy in the room, including United Way, we think a lot about how can our dollars be used to be flexible to pay for maybe some of the emergency supports that your students need, or the connecting with nonprofits who have a culturally sensitive focus, who can be the case managers or do that work for the young people in a way that will help them be successful in your program. So I think that's absolutely a piece of what you just said as well.
We're going to continue to increase those opportunities. Yep. As I said, rigor means that our students are succeeding and they can succeed at increasingly higher levels so that they'll be prepared once they leave. That's the measure of our success as a school district.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to shift to Dr. Edwards-Lang. We are so fortunate in this region to have an amazing community college system, and given our labor market and just the critical importance of post-secondary training, our colleges have been key partners in re-engaging opportunity youth really from the outset. My question for you is, how do you think about the role and responsibility of colleges in serving young adults who've been disconnected from school and work? And what do effective on-ramps look like so we're not forcing young people to first redo high school and then start college?
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership and for allowing me to be a part of this. I also have to thank the Roadmap Project for inviting us to be part of this conversation and part of the work. I think our executives set the stage, and when we talk about the prosperity that's in our region, a lot of that is driven by just a tremendous amount of jobs that are available. And yet most of them, we know that over 70% of those jobs require some kind of post-secondary credential. So it doesn't have to be an AA degree or even a 4-year bachelor's degree, but it does require some kind of post-secondary credential. So role for community colleges especially, and I have to say we changed our name to Seattle Central College because we do offer bachelor's degrees, but we are still a community-based college and operate in that way. So we're an open access. So that means we take students wherever they are, whatever their life circumstances, and provide them with the support and the education that they need to be ready for many of those jobs. And I think one of the things that I love about being at Seattle Central is we believe that access is not enough, that we really do have to partner with community-based organizations, with funders and others to provide the wraparound services for all of our students. But it's vitally important that we do that for Opportunity Youth because for many of them, the K-12 system, they've encountered many of the things that Frida talked about, or they haven't been in a school district like Kent where they've had the kind of wraparound services that they need. That takes their life circumstances into account as they're on their pathway. I think the other thing that a college has to offer, especially a college like Seattle Central, is that we have so many pathways. So if you think about a community college as being just a way to transfer to a 4-year, then you don't really understand what a community college is. So only 40% of our students are on track to transfer to a 4-year. The other 60% are on a track for living wage jobs. I mean, they're going to go directly from that credential into some kind of job placement. So one of the things that we've done with our program, Learning Center South, and it's actually based on a program that started at Shoreline Community College, is we take youth and we're helping them on that path to complete high school, but it's wraparound services to support them on the path, but also education planning, helping them think about where they want to go next after getting this GED or getting the high school completion. So it's not just the high school completion. It is, what are you going to do with it? What can we do to help provide you with career information, exposure to different careers, and then here's a pathway, an educational pathway for you to get there. And so I think that at least in our program, one of the things that we've tried to do is give students sort of competency-based opportunities so that they don't have to repeat work that they've done in high school. They can get credit for prior learning. It's flexible, just like Dr. Watts has described, so students can move at their own pace and complete modules as needed. We partner with community-based organizations like Goodwill and others, and United Way was really helpful to us as we started in providing those wraparound services as students are going along. So I think as we look, especially here in this region, at the importance of having some kind of post-secondary credential, having a college like Seattle Central, it gives that entry to completing high school, but it is an entry into something further beyond the high school and into a career.
Again, I think that theme of recognizing that there are things outside of the actual education that young people need to be able to stay, to survive in the college system, perhaps a system that they haven't encountered before, and to really be able to thrive and persist. Again, I think that's a common theme through all of the responses so far. And I can barely see you, Danica, but I want to turn to Danica. And at United Way, we've really, our partnerships with community-based organizations in all of the work that we do are just critical, and particularly looking at the disparities that young people, the disparities in who is Opportunity Youth and the barriers that young people are facing. We know that the variety of community-based organizations that we have in this region has been really critical to helping be culturally appropriate, match the young person to success, help remove some of those barriers, and then in the case of Seattle Education Access, really help that young person think about, what do I want to do next? How do I make that transition to the next level of education? And the Social Innovation Fund Opportunity Works project has really allowed United Way to raise match funding for that grant and really invest heavily in an incredible partnership with Seattle Education Access, doing post-secondary bridging to expand to nearly all of our Open Doors programs across the county. And we expect and hope to expand your services or help you guys expand to be on more college campuses as well. Danica, could you describe the kind of support that Seattle Education Access provides to students? And in your experience, what kinds of support do Opportunity Youth need to be successful in college? And I want to do a quick shout out. I know you have a lot of folks from your team here. So I just, again, a shout out to you and the team for expanding, for your leadership. Yay, SEA team. And tell us a little bit more about what the work is that you're doing and how you're supporting young people.
Yeah, thanks for giving them a shout out. The staff on our team is really, that's our entire program, right? That's how we're able to support young people. But Seattle Education Access, or SEA, as you'll hear us refer to ourselves, is an organization that provides specifically one-on-one higher education support to young people throughout King County. As Sara mentioned, we've expanded a lot over the past 3 years. Our staff, 3 years ago, we would have had 7, and there's about 18 with us today, which is really exciting. But basically, we support students one-on-one in finding the right secondary and post-secondary option for them, depending on what their schedule is, what their life circumstances are, and based on their education history as well. So our young folks, or our education advocates, are spread out to work with young folks across the county, embedded at some of the larger reengagement sites, but also taking on referrals from some of the smaller sites around the region. We work with students and walk alongside with them to do things like program and career exploration, applying to colleges, doing financial planning. We provide a heavy emphasis on financial planning and do financial aid. And for us, that doesn't mean here's the application for the website to do your financial aid application, to do your WASFA, to do your FAFSA. We sit next to folks side by side and do those applications and turn in the paperwork that's necessary for any of the colleges that they might attend. But we also assess for barriers in a student's life that might be a challenge for once they're in college, such as housing instability, immigration support needed, childcare resources, or even the fear of racism that our students are experiencing every single day. As much as we can, we're having conversations with these folks about the barriers in their life and are connecting them to community resources. But we're also acting as coaches and mentors. What we realized is the resources are important and we're connecting folks to those as much as possible. But we also like to recognize that young folks are surviving, right? They're doing their thing on their own and they're gonna survive with or without you, without that one-on-one support. Our goal is to expedite that process and get them to where they want to go as quickly as possible. But we also want to recognize the strengths that they have and the fact that they've been navigating these systems that have often been throwing them around throughout their entire life, whether that's foster care or the housing system or immigration or whatever that is. The pinnacle of our program really rests upon the relationship that the education advocates and the students have, from which all of our education activities stem. And we follow students until they're done. We know that college access is great and we can identify the steps that are necessary to make sure somebody is as well prepared as possible to step onto Seattle Central and feeling like they have everything covered. But we pile on the support over the next several quarters and until graduation because we realize that life happens. We've had folks lose housing, have a child in the middle of their education, have outside trauma, or need other resources. And our goal is to stick with those students throughout those circumstances and be ready for them whether they're stepping out of school or stepping back in based on their needs and priorities. So to your second point about what Opportunity Youth need to be successful in college is really what upper and middle class white students need to be successful as well, though it might look a little bit different. I think one of the most important things that's necessary is having a safety net for students. And so when you think about maybe folks you know or yourself, if you had a safety net when you were in college, if you failed a class, if you lost a scholarship, if you were short on rent, or if you need something, Your family might have been your resource, right? That is most often the case for upper and middle class, specifically white students. If you're opportunity youth, you might not have that safety net, and that's specifically because of institutionalized racism that perpetuates every single part of our lives. And so it prevents that safety net sometimes from even being ever formed, or sometimes it's ripping it apart for our students. Opportunity youth are often in need of specific resources like childcare, and while those resources can be accessed, and we often have contacts with those, and we work with amazing community partners who can provide those resources, the reality is that accessing those resources also requires a sacrifice on the student's part, and it's not something that upper and middle class students, and most oftentimes white students, have to sacrifice as well. So if you need benefits, you're taking time off to do that, you're stepping out of class, you're taking time away from your family, and so if you're low income, the number of hoops that you have to go through just in order to enroll at any college is unfair compared to the lack of hoops that exist for upper and middle class students. So our program aims to navigate these systems with students and provide one-on-one advocacy as much as possible. But we also realize that students are also living in fear with the reality that they are treated differently than their peers, right? Oftentimes we're having the conversation about imposter syndrome when students are enrolled in classes and feeling like they don't belong at that higher institution. And the ultimate fact is that secondary and post-secondary institutions were never created for opportunity youth, right? They're created specifically for upper class men. And I think that the support of having somebody advocate for you is very important. The institutional support that requires the shifting of power could be that much more important for opportunity youth. And I think about the fact that, Dow Constantine spoke about, investing in youth and highlighting the importance for things like restorative justice and things like that. But it's interesting that we're continuing the progress on a new youth jail, and it seems to contradict that point a little bit too. And I think that it's time that we figure out how to shift that actual power and put opportunity youth at the center and follow their lead and figure out what type of support that they need one-on-one and at an institutional level.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership. I'm going to throw out a couple of sort of questions that anyone can jump in on to answer, and then I want to make sure that we save some time for questions from the audience. So I'll start with, racial equity and social justice have been key themes of this convening, and frankly, I really appreciate that with each year that I've been at one of the Aspen convenings, racial equity has gotten more and more in the forefront of the breakout groups, of the plenary sessions. I think it's super important, and it's central to the work that we've all been describing. As you reflect on what John Powell and other presenters talked about this morning, if you were lucky enough to hear him speak, what does race equity mean, and actually, what does it mean, and what does it look like from your perspective to put racial equity at the center of our work? Does anyone want to take a stab at that? Frida, would you want to start with that one?
Sure. I'm sure racial equity means a lot of different things for everyone. It means a lot for me. But to me, what racial equity looks like, at first, when I was taking my notes, I got some feedback from someone. I was like, it looks like, artwork by people of color and undocumented people hanging up on, office walls. It looks like this and that, POC, 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 and this person challenged me, what about the white people? They still count. And so I'm changing my answer to what racial equity looks like to me is everyone doing their part of changing what the problems that exist because of it. What I mean by that is, this is no offense to anybody, but I think when organizations or companies want to tackle this beast of racial equity, they're like, let's make a racial equity committee. Let's make a racial equity team. I don't understand why that is. It is not a group or a team or a committee's responsibility. It's every single individual person's. I don't think it's fair that, you know, there's teams, and then within the teams there's that, you know, that strong black or brown woman that has to challenge herself to challenge the team and what they're saying. Like, that's not fair. We all need to take the responsibility of calling things out. We all need to check ourselves. And also, I don't think that racial equity should be something that's optional. If we can make mandatory all staff meetings, well, we need to make mandatory racial equity meetings. It's not, I don't think that it's something that we should leave wiggle room for people to opt out of. And if we continue to do that, it's going to continue to stay, because now you have a team that's woke, but what about the rest of the people? So, I mean, that's just my opinion on that.
Does anyone want to add on to that?
So maybe I can add that I agree with Rita. It is not having a racial equity team, and the entire leadership team at Seattle Central is the racial equity team. So one of the things that we've done at Central is our deans and our cabinet, we went through the city's race and social justice initiative training, and we are using a racial equity tool now in decision making. So I think that understanding where we are as a college, disaggregating our data so that we know what's happening with our students, what's happening with our faculty and our staff is important. We've actually had to look at the disconnect between the racial diversity of our student body and the racial diversity of our faculty. And I came to Seattle Central 3 years ago from the University of Washington, and this was a big issue there. And I did not expect to find it at a community college, but 70% of my faculty at Seattle Central are white, and 65% of the students are students of color. So it's a huge disconnect between who's teaching and then what they're teaching in the classroom and how our students are being treated in the classroom. So it really is looking at all of the systems that we have in place, from hiring to how we handle student complaints and how we respond to things that happen in the classroom. And it's not just one person's responsibility, although I did create a position of a chief diversity officer because we didn't have one. And that person's responsibility is not to work on student diversity, but really to look at what are the systems that we have at our college that perpetuate racism. And I am unapologetically leading with race. People say, well, what about all of the other dimensions of diversity? And I'm like, those are important, but I think that if we can lead with race and address all of the inequities that we see presenting themselves at our college along racial lines, then actually everyone will be better served in the institution. So we have a goal of undoing institutional racism at our college, and it is everybody's responsibility.
In Kent School District, we begin with the data, and it takes some of the emotion, even though we should never take the emotion out of race and equity or racial equity conversations. Kent School District is the 11th most diverse school district in the country. We're the 4th most densely populated manufacturing region in the country. 135 languages are spoken. 70% of our students identify as students of color. Our teacher staff and our amazing educators represent and identify 85% as white and 91 as white and 94 as female. So why is race and racial equity important? Well, it's important because if we do not identify it, we will continue to persist with the predictors that we currently have in public education, and I take no comfort in the fact that Kent School District is, while we are moving in the right direction, that we can make predictions based on the amount of money in a family's bank account. We can make predictions in the languages that our families speak. However, we can make even stronger predictions based on race, how our students are performing. We have a 79% graduation rate 4 years. That's okay. But I say that while some are jumping up and saying, yes, that's good, I'm saying, what about the other 21% of our families who have not met success in the form of graduation? And then if you tease that out, so while 8 out of every 10 of all Kent school districts are graduating on time within 4 years, 6, almost 7 out of every 10 of our black and brown young men and young women are graduating on time. That's unacceptable. And so until we can stop the predictors and make sure that access to equitable opportunities, resources for each and every, then we can no longer ignore the fact that race is a predictor and that race and equity must come together in order for us to not necessarily solve this problem, to create a solution that is sustainable.
Great. Thank you. You want to say something?
Yeah, I think I would just add on that putting racial equity work at the center really means that race equity work should not be an afterthought, right? As Frida, you were saying, it shouldn't be a committee. And I think that the need for ongoing racial justice training for folks on a consistent basis can't be said enough. I think that probably all of us have been in enough circles where you have folks that have been to, or who have been to trainings that are proclaiming cultural competence, and we know that's not a thing. And I think it's okay to admit that to ourselves, and also be willing to confront the white supremacist, white racist policies that we're implementing ourselves every single day. And I think that until we're examining the identities that we have and how we're potentially doing harm to the young people that we're serving on a regular basis, every day we don't do that is everyday loss that we are potentially harming young folks. And I think that, again, I think putting racial equity should mean putting young folks at the center and in power positions. If opportunity youth are majority of people of color, that means that shifting power to them and putting them in leadership positions should allow for changing of structures rather than upholding the same structures and bringing young folks into those leadership positions. I think if we're gonna change systems, we need to change leadership as well.
Great, thank you. And I'll just do a quick shout out. I don't know if Dr. Shelby Cooley is in the audience, but she's with the Roadmap Project, and I know she's speaking, I think it's on a panel tomorrow, did a really great report looking both quantitative and qualitative data on Black student success. I think it's called It Starts With Us. I might be misremembering that. And it's a great read, and really talking about sort of putting the families and young people in the public school system at the center, talking to African-American children, young people and their parents about sort of what are the solutions, what do you need, and sort of contrasting that with the data and coming up with some really interesting solutions. So kudos to all of you for the great work that you're doing in your institutions, and may we all follow with you. So we just have a few minutes left. I'm going to ask a question about sort of the partnerships and coordination. And so, like I said earlier, Seattle and King County is an area that has a multitude of amazing programs and services to address a number of needs, right? We are a very program-rich environment. Nonprofits proliferate in many ways, and to the good, right? So we have nonprofits that have emerged to provide services in a specific area geographically to a specific population, to be able to deliver those services in a culturally appropriate manner. And at the same time that we're program rich, we're system poor. And so that partnership and coordination is really important. So I'll throw this out again as a question to whoever wants to take it on. We have a King County Reengagement Provider Network that convenes regularly to look at progress on our shared metrics, discuss challenges, refine our partnerships, and really think about quality improvement across all of those different programs. For anyone who wants to take it on, what do you see as the value of a coordinated strategy and a regional community practice?
Simply, please.
Oh, thank you. I think that one of the values to our coordinated strategy, and specifically the regional convenings, is the shared accountability for progressive change that is necessary in our region. At a lot of our meetings and trainings, we're sharing data and we're putting our programs on display for folks to learn from, but also pick apart. And I think that the level of vulnerability as a program that requires is part of the key to a lot of growth that has happened in our region, but also a lot of the growth that still needs to happen. I think that also being part of the larger roadmap region has allowed folks to realize that their work is not in isolation. They can be a part of a larger collective impact movement, but it also means that they can't get away with doing the things that they've always done for years and proclaim that it's working, when research done by Dr. Shelby Cooley is saying, you know, Black and brown students need and want folks that look like them in the classroom, and we have very specific demands that are coming from young people, and I think it's put some pressure on some of our programs to implement changes in direct response to that, such as incorporating ethnic studies in re-engagement programs, which hasn't been a thing until now.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Dr. Watts, did you want to add?
And thank you. So I can't say enough about the fact that I can say enough, as I'm actually, if we work together, I'll just say this, now I just lost my train of thought. That train just left the building, and I apologize.
All right.
I apologize. So we are.
Okay.
Give me one key word and
Partnerships.
thank you. See, it's partnerships.
All right.
Thank you. Collective efficacy. Collective efficacy simply means that we can do okay by ourselves. We will be much better as a team. It's simple. It's just not easy. The reality is we're so used to working in silos, working alone, and figuring out that this works for one, and it may not work for all. Hear me when I say, so tying in race and racial equity with our partnerships, so to our white sisters and brothers, please hear me when I say I don't have to look like you to be your advocate. This is a common phrase and belief in Kent School District. However, yes, and if I don't see images of me, how will I know that I can be me? Now, I say that as one of 4 African American superintendents in the state of Washington. And if you peel that down by race and gender, I'm one of 2 African American male superintendents, and that was before my colleague and friend was named a year and a half ago, where of 295 school districts when I arrived here, I was the only. And my wife and I have 1 son. If he wanted to be a superintendent, he could only talk to me about that work. That's real. That also means that I need to partner with those who don't. I have to. I have no choice. If I want to partner, I have to make sure that I'm reaching out. And I'm thankful. I was born and raised in this region where I had no choice. But when I looked around, I saw someone who did not look like me, someone who did not speak the same language that I did, and I learned a great deal. I also moved across the country. I did the reverse migration and grew up professionally in an organization in Atlanta, Georgia. And I came home to serve, to lead, and realizing now that United Way and Goodwill, who are strong supporters of our work in Kent School District, particularly with iGrad, that if we do not come together, so for all those who don't necessarily have an open doors or don't have an organized collective impact approach to the work, know that it simply takes reaching out, a phone call, a text to say, what resources, what opportunities can you provide that can address a need that we currently have? Identify the problem. Once you identify the problem, there are solutions. The answer will always be in the room. And we found that to our success and our benefit. We're just getting started, and we have a plan, and we're looking forward to sustainable success. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to my last formal question, and I'm going to actually, if you all wrote notes in response to the question, I'm going to ask you to shift your minds a little bit. I want to do a lightning round, right? So I want to have these as sort of really brief, high level, a few words, sort of powerful advice you can give to your colleagues in the room. And so the question really is, given our lessons learned here in South King County, some of the challenges we're still working on as we try to build a really strong system to re-engage opportunity youth, what is the one piece of advice, in as few words as possible, so everyone in the room will remember it, what is the one piece of advice you want to share with other communities, with your peers who work in similar institutions in other parts of the country?
So I don't know that my thinking has changed, because for me it's the partnership and collaboration, because we don't have to provide everything that we know that our students want. So the success comes from partnering and collaborating with others who have better expertise at providing mental health services than we do as educators, or they may have better expertise at reaching out and bringing young people in who've been disengaged. So partnering and collaboration.
Great, thank you.
Establish strong relationships with those within your organization and outside. And remember that what gets monitored gets done. What gets monitored and measured typically gets done well.
Great, thank you.
I think that it's important to learn how to be a good ally, and which should mean knowing when is right and knowing how to specifically give up your privilege in order for somebody to take your seat, take your spot, and become in a position of power and leadership.
I would say that this work is slow, as it should be. This is not work that should be rushed. And I think a lot of times we feel that it's too slow, but just trust the process. And I would also say to always step into the room as a human being first and everything else second. I for a long time stepped into rooms as trying to sound the whitest and thinking that my job title wasn't good enough. So knowing your power and believing that just who you are as a human being and the culture that you hold is enough to be able to step into these spaces and do this work.
Great. I'll chime in just from the funder perspective. I think my advice to funders would be to take risks, as we were saying from the beginning, to build partnerships, to center youth voice, and to listen and lead with humility. So, excellent. So thank you both. We have 4 incredible leaders here who are doing tireless efforts on behalf of young people in King County. I want to thank them, but before we close out, I want to see if there's any questions from folks in the room. Questions or comments, thoughts? And I think we have some mics. A mic. Anybody? Yes, there's someone right over there.
So you told a great story about the teacher going through a divorce who had a tough time, and then when a student in her class had trouble, she was unsympathetic. I'm just curious, when you suggested to her that her experience should make her more open, what happened?
Oh, she said that what he was going on outside of school should not affect his performance in class.
Oh. Yes. Yes, over here.
Hi, so this question is to Dr. Lang and Dr. Watts, and kind of in response to what Danica and Frida had both mentioned about racism being a real issue, and to the story she just talked about, you just referenced about how that's put on the children while they're either in K-12 or as they go on to post-secondary. You talked a lot about some of the programs you're doing. Is implicit bias training part of that for those that work the most with the students?
So absolutely. One of the things is just making sure that everyone knows what implicit bias is, because our faculty, are, unless you do diversity and equity work, that's something that you may not come across. So offering that throughout, I love the mandatory training. We can't make faculty do anything, but we can provide incentives. So we've done implicit bias training on our campus. But we've also brought in Robin D'Angelo, I don't know if you all know, who does white privilege training. And we brought her the first time, and it was really interesting because the folks of color really felt like they were put in a position of dealing with their white colleagues and their guilt and their anxiety over what was happening. And so we brought Robin back, and we made it available just for white identified folks on campus, so that they could have those conversations and that the people of color wouldn't be put in a position of trying to make them feel better. And so we brought her twice for day-long presentations with our faculty. And so that went really well. But we're doing it ongoing, so it's not just episodic. And providing, my first year at Seattle Central, we sent a team of 20 people to the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity. And then we had them come back and do workshops with peers on campus. And so we've continued that tradition. They'll be going at the end of this month, actually, to do that again. So just, it's one of those where you just can't do it once. You have to reinforce it over and over again.
And for me, while I serve as CEO, and E changes daily. So yes, Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Education Officer, and Chief Equity Officer. And the reality is our board, when I was appointed, I asked our board, do you want to be a team of 6 or do you want to be a team of 5+1? And they looked at me like, well, what do you mean? And I said, we're going to be a board superintendent governance team. That means if race and equity is a priority for us, then we're going to go through this together. We are going to learn together. So we have sent our board and members of our board to white privilege conferences. So not, as Dr. Ling had mentioned, not just episodic, but it goes deeper. I have also made sure that our teachers union, again, while we cannot require or mandate training, we want to make it so endearing, so important to the work that why would you not want to go through this? And that included people thought I was crazy, but I made sure that our teachers union president was a member of our cabinet. And she sits on cabinet, and we meet, actually we're meeting at 3 o'clock today. We meet monthly, but she also sits on cabinet and provides input because our KEA provides race and equity, implicit bias, culturally responsive practices for our teachers. Is that enough? Absolutely not. So what gets monitored gets done, what gets measured gets done well. Our strategic plan has four goals. Our 4th goal is to recruit, hire, develop, and retain a premier and diverse workforce. So with diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have made sure through policy, race and equity policy, and through our strategic plan that has measurable objectives, and we define diversity as we expect that our staff, and at certain levels it's more diverse than others, will, to the extent that we can, reflect the community we serve. We are increasing that opportunity and access each and every day. That's part of our work.
Thank you. Other questions? It's hard to see. And could you say who you are, what organization you're with?
New York City folks sitting at this table, we always have a lot of questions. Marjorie Parker with Jobs First NYC. My question is for 2 young ladies. This morning, we have some young people here that said that as young people, they feel a lot of pressure to be the face of the change movement. And someone made a comment that the adults have failed the younger generation. I wonder what kind of pressure you feel as a younger person around the burden you have to carry to be the face of change or the face of this movement for youth-led movement.
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, I still identify as a young person because I'm technically within the age range that our organization can serve. And I definitely feel a lot of pressure to kind of morph into what is expected of me on this stage, when I'm with students, when I'm at partner sites, when I'm facilitating staff meetings. And I think that because of the systems that we're navigating every single day, it's a curse and a blessing because I think that we're able to share our experiences with students all the time and relate to the fact that we were treated poorly too going through education systems, and we didn't feel like it was made for us because it wasn't, and we didn't feel like we belonged there. But it also means that pressure doesn't go away now that you're in a professional setting and learning to adapt to white culture is something that I started learning right away. And I also have a lot of like power and privilege growing up and in my own life now that has allowed me to have so many different advantages. But I think the fact that there are certain expectations for how you're supposed to speak, how you're supposed to act on a daily basis because of what your background is or what you look like is something it's not going anywhere, and it's something that I think about every single day. When I was talking to Frida actually before we came on stage because I brought my huaraches to wear on stage, and I was like, should I wear them? I feel like I kind of need some like strength a little bit. And she was like, yeah, wear them. You got it. Like I'm channeling my people, and I think that we do what we can. And thank you, Frida, because I decided to wear the shoes because I think that ultimately we have to draw strength from where we can, whenever we can, because it feels like we're giving up so much of ourselves and our souls on a regular basis that it's tiring, right? Like we're tired all the time. And self-care is important and blah, 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 but like, it's not, I think that collective self-care and collective change is just so much more important than, or just so much more powerful than, taking a day off, whatever. That's important, but, I'm more interested in how to make broader changes for young folks so that they're not having to deal with those pressures on a daily basis when they're in my role.
What she said. Yeah, it's definitely exhausting. It's not like we jump in and jump out of these shoes. It's like we take these things home with us. We think of the comments that people say, and it's hard because we're thinking of their comment and our anger, and then we're thinking of ways to address it and how can we present ourselves or how can we word it. It's a lot. I think it really messed me up, honestly. I truthfully wish that I had never learned how to code switch, because I learned it at such a young age, and I code switched so much to the point where I think I just lost myself and my complete identity. It wasn't until 2016 where I was leading the Pacific Island group on campus, and I was so hesitant to do it. They actually made a sign-up sheet of 20 plus students that were like, we want you to teach. I don't know how these kids knew, but I'm very strongly culturally rooted. And it's something that our young people today just don't have. Thank you, bro. They were so hungry for a culture that I have been hiding away that I was forced to teach it, and I was forced to bring my real authentic self out from the dark. And for once in my life, I realized I'm a damn Pacific Islander. I am a Samoan. I am the daughter of a chief. I can't hide that. And these young people will never know that Miss Frida would never identified as, who I was showing to them and who I brought. But they taught me, to truly forget it. Forget code switching. Forget trying to present yourself as this whatever, professional, whatever. Just bring, that's why I say, be your real self. I was really hesitant to, wear my cultural, sorry, this is very deep for me. I always bun my hair because I don't want to hear these, you look like Moana comments, all these microaggressions. And I had a deep conversation with my partner, should I show my hair tomorrow? Should I wear the say? Should I wear a necklace? And so it's very deep and it's personal, and we take that shit home. And for me, it impacted me greatly. And like I said, I'm learning to unlearn the things that I have been taught in institutions and really, I'm sorry. Well, I need to take a breath. But yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard, and it hurts, and it's really exhausting. And yeah, I say like code switching is like you're suffocating. Can I breathe? Can I step out? But yeah, it's really hard. I'm learning how to own my identity, my culture, and just bring my true self and my big personality to the spaces and the work that I've done. I apologize. I don't apologize. Sorry.
On that note, I want to thank these 4 amazing leaders doing incredible work in Seattle and King County. Thank you for spending lunchtime with us. Thank you for all you do.
Well, in keeping with tradition, after something incredibly powerful and emotional happens, I get up and talk about buses. So thank you, Frida. I'm a little choked up. The short announcement is if you're with the Leadership Council, we're going to hop on a bus out of the lobby in about 15 minutes. So try to make your way up to the lobby quickly for the Leadership Council meeting. Let's give that gang another round of applause. That was incredible. And there's a lot of different moving parts for this afternoon, so check your calendar. We knew that Constantine had some gray jokes, so we made it gray for his part of the afternoon, but now it's sunny again, as promised. So don't slip out and enjoy the sunshine.